Story 1. This has been an ongoing problem for quite a while. I mostly stayed out of it as much as possible, but I've reached my limit and need some help wording a response to address the situation. Let me start with a bit of backstory. Back in 2019, when my partner and I started dating, I first met his mother. At first, she seemed nice, but honestly, I felt something was off about her, maybe a bit fake. After a few more interactions, my partner's mother began claiming I was pregnant because her spirit guides told her so. She was deeply into haunted houses and all that, which I went along with to avoid disrespecting her beliefs, though I made it clear when asked that I didn't share the same views. Then came the global pandemic and the need to stay at my partner's parents' house for 2 weeks, while the bathroom in my rental unit was being renovated due to a leak. My partner was living with them at the time. During this period, I discovered that his mother was a hoarder. If I could share pictures, I would, though even the ones I have don't capture the worst of it. She frequently complained to others about me, claiming I didn't clean or cook despite never asking me to help or clarifying her expectations. She also made inappropriate remarks, like accusing me of using fistfuls of toilet paper when, in her words, one square should be fine for both ends. Seriously. Later, she sent a message suggesting we start over, but it didn't seem genuine. After those 2 weeks, I moved back to my place and limited interactions with her to occasional family events, such as birthday dinners. Fast forward through a few house moves, and by 2023, I found myself unexpectedly pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't a shock since I wasn't on birth control at the time. I had stopped because it affected my mood and possibly interfered with some medications I was taking for depression. My roommate at the time moved to Brisbane due to the housing crisis, so my partner and I moved in with his parents again. Around this time, his youngest sister had a baby boy. His mother began making strange comments, though I don't recall all the details. She was very vocal about breastfeeding, insisting that I must breastfeed my baby. I told her I would if I could, but would switch to formula if necessary, which she didn't like. She also started pushing for a baby shower and gender reveal party, neither of which I was interested in. Thankfully, they never happened, though she threatened to make them a surprise. By this point, I was exhausted and not working, around 4 months pregnant. Her behavior became increasingly bizarre. She claimed she was talking to famous actors, starting with Keanu Reeves, then Brad Pitt, and eventually Johnny Depp. She even consulted a psychologist, who apparently told her it was fine as long as she wasn't hurting anyone. Massive internal eye rolls on my part. When it came to the birth of my child, my mother-in-law insisted on being present. I said no immediately. She then shifted to demanding she be in the waiting room so she could see the baby first. Again, I refused. To avoid conflict, we didn't tell her the scheduled date for the induction, which was deemed necessary due to a high-risk pregnancy. It ended in a cesarean section because of fetal distress. Her reaction was predictably dramatic. She accused me of favoritism, saying if my mother were around, I'd let her in the delivery room. I laughed and firmly told her that wasn't true. I didn't want my mom there either, only my partner. She loudly shared her frustrations with her friends, accusing me of spying on her when I overheard. This argument went on for months until I publicly shut it down by correcting her in front of her friend when she claimed she would be in the delivery room. Her comments didn't stop there. She told others she wouldn't love my child as much as she loved her grandson and often spoke about it on the phone. For context, she babysat her grandson frequently and had a history of walking over her youngest daughter, something I refused to tolerate. After our baby was born tiny at just 4.5 pounds 2.1 kilograms and delivered at 37 weeks, we established some strict rules regarding smoking due to our baby's fragile health. Both my partner and I smoke, but his mother chain smokes outside, and the rules apply to all of us. Predictably, she didn't take these rules well. I spent a lot of time in the room with my baby because I didn't trust his mother. Anything involving her and our daughter was left to my partner to handle, as it's his mother. She only held our daughter once after thoroughly showering, because usually she'd expect me to hand over the baby immediately after she'd been smoking, without washing her hands, face, or changing her shirt. Around this time, I had blocked her on Facebook to prevent her from accessing photos of my baby. My partner also sent a message to everyone, explaining that we didn't want photos of our baby shared and reiterating the rules. When my mom visited a month after the baby was born, things got tense. My mother has severe asthma and doesn't smoke, which my mother-in-law couldn't stand. She made snide remarks, asking if my mom could hold the baby whenever she wanted since she doesn't smoke. The answer was obviously yes. During this visit, my mother-in-law attempted to test boundaries, trying to take the baby from my mom, but my firm glare seemed to work, and she backed off. However, things escalated when she sent photos of my baby's birth to the person she believed was Johnny Depp, claiming he had painted or drawn pictures of her. After reverse image searching, we found out these were not his creations and were much older than my baby. She even claimed he contacted his lawyers over someone stealing his work. The whole situation was absurd. Everyone in the family tried to get her help, but she kept lying and avoiding accountability. Eventually, even her other daughter stopped engaging with her. My partner and I moved in with friends to escape the drama and later found our own place. During this time, my partner would block her number intermittently, but she would call using private numbers, harassing him nonstop. In October, my brother and his mother visited. I made my brother my baby's godfather and my partner's youngest sister the godmother. My mother-in-law found out about the baptism and saw it as her last chance. She showed up late, created drama with some of the guests, but fortunately was civil with my brother and his mom. Now, as my baby's first birthday approaches, we've kept our address private to avoid her showing up uninvited. She's done this before, including at her youngest daughter's house and her grandson's party, despite being explicitly told she wasn't welcome. When confronted, she resorted to yelling and name-calling, claiming she had a right to see her grandchildren. Recently, someone informed her about the upcoming birthday party, and she's spiraling again. She's threatened to pursue grandparents' rights, which aren't a thing here, and continues to insist she'll attend the party. She even claims Johnny Depp is coming to discuss things with us, which is, of course, nonsense. My partner and I have been consistent in stating our rules and explaining why we limit contact. Yet she accuses us of abusing her and refuses to accept that the decisions are mutual between both of us. Her harassment has reached the point where I'm considering legal action. If she shows up at the party, I'll call the police, and I'm seriously considering a restraining order. I need a clear way to communicate that she has no parental rights over our child and cannot endanger my baby, regardless of whether the people she's talking to are actual celebrities or scammers. It's time for her to back off for good. Story 2. Let me preface this story by admitting that 1. It takes 2 people to have problems in a marriage, and 2. My husband is the one that made vows to me, not the other people involved in the story. However, the chance for revenge simply fell onto my lap, and these other people are objectively terrible people, while my husband is not. My husband and I have been married for almost 17 years, and these past 2 years have really been tiring for us both. Teenage kids, mental health issues, job losses, pandemic, you name it. He started a new job and got back in contact with a female friend from high school that was employed at the same place. They restarted their friendship, and I knew about it. Part of their friendship must have included venting about each other's significant others, and they bonded over their unhappiness, I guess. Over the next few months, they continued their friendship online only, and it eventually morphed into her sending photos to him. 2 days later, she sent me snapshots of what ensued. She also shared with her boyfriend, who then threatened my husband's life, started to harass me, and threatened to come into my workplace until I had to call the police. While I don't in any stretch of the imagination consider my husband to be totally innocent in all this, what I think happened was that this woman found my husband vulnerable and simply used and manipulated him to both make her boyfriend jealous and try to completely destroy our marriage just to be vindictive. I mean, wouldn't most people delete that? My life implodes for a bit, and I'm reeling. Once I start looking into who these people are and what they're about, who wouldn't? It doesn't take much Googling to find that this boyfriend of hers, in addition to being an abuser, is actually a fraud and a scammer with a history of selling fraudulent tickets to fake food festivals in different cities around the US. And he's currently selling tickets to a food festival coming up in the same city that I am now a new co-director of an annual large-scale event. So, I'm starting to know people, and don't think the woman is innocent. She helps him promote it knowing full well he is stealing hard-earned money from hundreds of people just like he has done in the past. Fast forward a few weeks, and I am in an event planning meeting with the other co-director of the event and the head of the tourism bureau for our city. One of them brings up the shadiness of the upcoming food festival and how it must be a scam, and I tell them, yes, I know who is behind it, and I guarantee it is a scam. A couple days later, it is in the news that there is someone selling fraudulent tickets to an event that no one has permits for. You're welcome. People hear this and start calling out the organizers as scammers and demanding refunds. They were selling tickets as if the event were being held in a large park, and after the exposure were forced to find and secure a location which turned out to be a parking lot of a dive bar in a bad part of town. More people demand refunds because it's not what they were sold, and there starts to be a buzz about lawsuits. A few weeks later, I'm in another event planning meeting, and I express concern over how fraudulent events in our city may affect the reputation of other events in the city. Someone contacts the news stations and radio stations, and there are investigative reports done on this upcoming food festival. Again, people are super mad. Hundreds of people demand refunds. Customers that have bought tickets begin taking things into their own hands and calling vendors that the organizers claim to be taking part and find that most are not coming. The organizers were lying. The day of the event comes and hundreds of people still show up hoping to get what they paid for. People drove from states away with small children, hoping for a fun family event. There is only one vendor. No drinks, no live music, no kids' festival, no t-shirts, no tables or chairs. The cops are called. The one vendor that showed up is suing because he got paid nothing. I've heard the organizers are being investigated for internet fraud. They were evicted from their home. She lost her job. Good luck finding another. Don't screw with me and my family. Ever. Story 3. I've been staying with my partner and his family this week, and it's been absolutely amazing. I've never felt happier. On Monday, I went to work and decided I didn't want to go back home to my family. My mother has spent days on end ignoring me except to make snide comments about how useless I am to her. I needed time for myself, so I went to my partner's place and stayed there. My mother didn't contact me for 3 days, except to ask if I could pay for my sister's uniform. I said yes, I wanted to do that for my sister anyway, and that was the last I heard from her. 2 days later, today, I started getting spam calls from her and messages asking me to call her instead of texting. I finally bit the bullet and texted her, explaining exactly how she and my family have made me feel and why I haven't gone home. I clarified that I wasn't criticizing her, but rather expressing my feelings. I even acknowledged the pressures in her life that could make her upset. All I asked was that she treat me kindly and not contribute to the thoughts of self-harm I've been struggling with. You can probably guess what happened next. She exploded at me. She called me weak, entitled, and ungrateful. She said I was acting like a child, being overly sensitive, and that I'd be nothing without my family. She accused me of moping around and claimed I'd never survive in my career if I couldn't handle her criticism. She went on to say that a good daughter would focus on contributing to the household instead of hiding in her room. She blamed my partner, saying that because of him, I'm ruining my future, that he's not good for me, and that I didn't behave this way before getting back together with him. In reality, my partner has been the most supportive person in my life. In just 5 days, we've accomplished tasks I'd been putting off for a year due to fear of failure and low self-esteem, which stemmed from the environment I was in. Before reconnecting with him, I was constantly out, drinking and using substances as an escape from how my mother made me feel. She doesn't know that part of my life. I got myself together before I ever reached out to him again. She then guilt-tripped me, saying that my elderly relatives have been staying up late waiting for me, that my younger siblings are crying for me, and that she hasn't slept because I haven't kept her updated about where I am. It made me feel awful. I tried to explain how difficult life has been for me lately, balancing work, university, and home. I told her that home should feel like a safe haven, a place to relax after a tough day, but instead, I feel hated, judged, and as though I can't do anything right. I told her I never get any respite. She dismissed everything I said, claiming I have no idea what a hard day truly looks like compared to her and her sister. She brought up how my nearly 40-year-old aunt works full-time, studies full-time, takes care of her family, and still finds time for hobbies. She told me my life is luxurious in comparison to hers, where she has to care for elderly parents while being a mother to my siblings. She said I need to toughen up and return home, because if she can't leave her responsibilities, neither should I. According to her, I owe the village that raised me, and I disappointed her by running away. She said even more things I don't want to repeat. Essentially, she doubled down on the behaviors I had asked her to stop. It hurt deeply, and I've been sobbing in my partner's arms for hours. I just can't understand why my mother refuses to see how much her actions hurt me. I wasn't asking for much, just not to be yelled at, sworn at, backstabbed, or spoken down to. Yet she acted as if my request was outrageous and selfish. She ended the conversation with, "I'm annoyed at you, but I still love you." Honestly, I don't feel very loved. I feel gaslighted, unheard, and completely heartbroken. I have to go home tomorrow to pick up some clothes, but I'm not in a financial position to live with my partner permanently. I don't want to impose on his family either. I also know that if I leave, my mother will likely cut me off from my younger siblings because she knows how much I love them. I have no idea how to handle that. I don't know how to handle anything right now. Any thoughts or advice would be greatly appreciated. Update: she just called me, demanding that I be home tonight. She even threatened to come to my partner's house if I'm not back by 7 p.m. Story 4. So, I'm going for a bike ride down the bike path. I've been out for about an hour, so I decide to cut through a parking lot to get home. And as I do so, this car comes flying in, doing at least 100 kilometers an hour, nearly hits me, and stops about 2 feet in front of some guy who looked like he was at least 90, causing this poor old man to drop what looks like a salad wrap, who then runs off. Turns out, about 100 feet farther down the path, and I would have noticed that where it passes under a bridge, a police car had actually hit itself under the bridge. So now they come out, pull up to this woman's car, and step out. This is important, so stay with me. The woman in the car was African American, and so was one of the police officers. They step out of the car, and now she gets out. She then pulls the most dumb move possible. Entitled mother, what seems to be the problem, officer? The nerve of this woman. The police officer, the African American one, we can call him the police officer one, stands in silence for a moment, seemingly bewildered. He then responds to her and calls her on her nonsense. Police officer one, you know you just almost killed an old man, right? I don't remember all of the exact wordings, but it was more or less this. Entitled mother, that man was on the other side of the parking lot. Not only is she a liar, but she's dumb too. I'm pretty sure police officer 1 would have mentioned me had I been visible from that angle, but I never saw the hidden car, so I'm assuming they hadn't seen her almost kill me. Anyways, she starts shouting at them. So are you going to come up with a stupid lie so you can arrest me? Because I'm not white enough. Keep in mind that both the entitled mother and police officer 1, the officer talking to her, are African American, and she is accusing him of being racist. Before police officer 1 can say anything about this nonsense, her crazy kid steps out of the car. He looks like he's about 7, and I can see another small kid strapped into a car seat, and a man with his head in his hands, presumably tired of his mother's dumb nonsense. The kid starts punching and kicking police officer 1, to which he ignores for a few seconds before the kid does the craziest thing. He actually makes an attempt to take the guy's gun. Thankfully, he's unaware that those holsters have locks to prevent such a thing, and doesn't even get close to the holster anyway. As the kid gets lightly pushed away without even being directly looked at, he doesn't even fall over. Actually, he doesn't even move all that much until he runs back to the car. The entitled mother starts screaming. Entitled mother, don't touch my kid. Police officer 2. Ma'am, your kid just tried to grab my partner's gun. You deserve it, you Nazi. As I'm watching from about 20 feet away, I hear her kid start screaming again, and now the kid is hitting police officer 2 with the toddler's car seat. Police officer 1 just grabs the car seat and tosses it, so the kid starts punching and kicking again. The entitled mother begins saying things like, "Get him," and stuff like that, always somehow working in a way to call police officers 1 and 2 a Nazi every time she says it. Police officer 1, can you please get control of your child? Entitled mother, why would I tell him to leave a Nazi alone? Cue the nearby people who only now heard this. Police officer 1 picks up the kid and puts him in the car, and then about 10 people walk over, telling police officers 1 and 2 to leave the kid alone, to which the old guy, who is now back, starts shouting that they did nothing to the crazy kid. And then I start supporting the old guy. Let's call him nice man, because they had, in fact, not hurt the crazy kid at all. Now the entitled mother is getting more riled up, if such a thing can be done. Arrest me, you racist piece of trash. She then gets in his car, shouting all the while, and now another police car, and another, and they keep showing up until there are about 30 officers around this woman, probably because of the steadily growing mob of homeless people shouting at the police officers. I move to get a better look, and accidentally move in front of a man eating some chicken from the nearby chicken place, who can barely ask me to move over, because he can't stop laughing, to which I move over so he can see. The police seem to realize that this woman is about to start a riot, but let her go, to which she gets in her car. Before she does, the father steps out, we'll call him nice father, grabs the entitled mother's arm to get her attention, screams at her for a solid minute, during which nobody else says a word, except Chicken Guy, who is still laughing and recording. The nice father then goes back to the car, but doesn't get in. The entitled mother gets in and starts to drive off, but the father shouts at her to wait. She stops, and he gets his takeout lunch out of the passenger's seat, then just walks away. Now the mob dissipates, but about 3 police get in their cars and silently follow her, so they can arrest her without a mob. So that was the strangest thing I ever saw in the history of my life. Story 5. For the past few years, I've been a nurse. I started my career in the emergency department of a small hospital in Canada. This hospital could handle basic admissions, surgeries, and critical care, but we transferred seriously ill patients to larger metropolitan hospitals with more specialized services, such as cardiology or trauma surgery. Due to the small population we served, our department operated with the bare minimum number of nurses, often resulting in each nurse taking on an extra patient compared to other hospitals. However, since the severity of illnesses was generally lower, it balanced out. Our workload often became overwhelming during the latter half of the day shift and the beginning of the night shift when patient volume peaked. Later in the night, the workload typically decreased, and we had enough staff to manage efficiently. Despite this, management didn't reduce staffing further. Because of our lean team, we didn't have coverage during breaks, meaning one nurse had to monitor double the patients if their partner was on break. This wasn't a big issue at night, but was quite challenging during the day, often leading to missed unpaid 30-minute breaks on day shifts due to high workloads. Another key detail is the way we were organized. Our teams consisted of one emergency nurse, someone with advanced training to handle a wider range of care, and one medical surgical nurse, an experienced nurse waiting to enter the advanced training program. These teams gave and received patient handovers together, doubling the handover time compared to individual nurse-to-nurse reports. This process, while efficient for continuity of care, significantly extended our shifts. Our union had negotiated a contract to address potential wage issues. If we missed our unpaid 30-minute break, we could claim it at overtime pay 1.5 times our regular rate. Additionally, if handovers extended past our 12-hour shifts, we could claim an extra 15 minutes at straight-time pay. We missed our break about every other day shift during a 2-day, 2-night rotation, and handover always ran late. Management wasn't thrilled about paying this, but since nurses occasionally took extra rest during quiet night shifts, it seemed to balance out. On those nights, we would sometimes rest for an extra 30 to 45 minutes. This wasn't an issue because patient throughput remained consistent, as one nurse could manage the workload during this time. We always left our contact numbers with our partners in case of emergencies, ensuring we could return promptly if the situation escalated. If we had critically ill patients, we strictly adhered to the entitled break time or skipped breaks altogether. For a while, this system worked well. Management saved money, patient care wasn't compromised, and the extra rest improved our well-being, helping us transition more easily between night and day shifts. However, this balance was disrupted by one of our less pleasant charge nurses. The charge nurse acts as the supervisor of the unit. In most hospital units with admitted patients, this role is typically a daytime job from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays, with bedside nurses covering the role during off hours. In the emergency department, though, specific nurses worked rotating shifts as charge nurses, earning a small pay bump. Gaps in the schedule were filled by senior emergency nurses since managing the emergency department required unique expertise. While I understand this charge nurse was likely under immense stress, their actions created significant tension. One morning, I arrived at work, preparing for the usual busy day, when an email popped up. It stated that night shift breaks were now limited to the union-mandated times, 60 minutes of unpaid break and 45 minutes of paid break. I was annoyed, but had to admit it was technically correct. Some nurses had taken advantage of the previous system. For instance, one nurse covering as charge consistently advocated for over 3.5 hours of break time on night shifts, even when patients were critically ill. This practice compromised patient safety, especially during the first half of the night when the workload was still high. Thankfully, most nurses didn't follow their lead, as emergency nurses typically aren't the type to slack off. The email quickly circulated through our group chats, ensuring everyone was aware of the changes. Many of the younger staff, who were familiar with our rights, started documenting every missed break and extended handover. They also helped older staff understand how to do the same. That very day, I missed my last break and stayed 15 minutes past my shift for handover. Following the new rules, I submitted the appropriate forms and received an extra $50 before taxes on my paycheck. The charge nurse on duty seemed surprised when I presented the form, but I explained that I was just following the rules to avoid pay discrepancies. During my next night shift, I noticed a sign-in sheet on the desk where we were required to log the start and end times of our breaks. There was even a column for our phone numbers so we could be called back if needed. However, this didn't align with our contract, as we weren't being paid the extra $4 per hour to be on call. Calling us back should have been paid at overtime rates. I refused to leave my number, stating that unless there was a medical emergency with no pulse, commonly referred to as a code blue, I wouldn't be coming back early. Code blues were announced over the hospital's intercom system, so my number wasn't necessary. For the next 2 weeks, I strictly adhered to the contract. I documented every missed break and every instance of extended handover. On quiet night shifts, I often found myself staring at my phone, waiting for the doctor to assign tasks after I'd completed all my work. While it might not seem like much, the additional hour of handover pay and occasional missed breaks amounted to approximately $2,000 extra annually per full-time nurse. This was a significant amount for a publicly funded healthcare system. Eventually, our manager noticed the impact and clarified that we could still take extra rest on night shifts as long as we left our phone numbers. They even assured us in person that they would sign off on any additional wages if we preferred to work through breaks instead. I asked for this clarification in writing, but I didn't escalate the issue to our union representative since the situation had already been resolved in my favor. I left that job later and have been much happier working at a larger hospital for the past 2 years. The new hospital has better practices in place. For instance, a designated nurse covers my breaks and my partner's breaks, ensuring that patient care remains uninterrupted. There are no more team setups, and the focus on staff well-being is much stronger. We're encouraged to take longer breaks when possible to prevent burnout, which was a significant issue at my previous job. Now, I consistently document my missed breaks and extra rest time to ensure everything aligns properly. Management here is also willing to approve missed break claims to support staff retention, but I don't feel comfortable taking advantage of that generosity unnecessarily. I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to rest when needed and work in an environment that values both staff and patient well-being. Looking back, the experience taught me a lot about advocating for fair treatment and the importance of proper staffing and break policies in healthcare. It's a relief to be in a workplace that prioritizes these things, and I can confidently say that the changes have made me a better and more content nurse. Story 6. A few years ago, my best friend and I rented a tiny 2-bedroom flat together. This place was kind of terrible. My friend's room had a hole cut into the wall, so the last foot of the bed would fit. This became a mantelpiece in the next room. The kitchen was the size of a child's playhouse kitchen, and the upstairs neighbors spent all hours of the day and night screaming at each other. But we were mostly happy because we were living with 6+ other people. We paid £75 a week each plus bills for this place, which was pretty standard for a 2-bed flat in our area. Then 6 months into our 1-year contract, the landlord sold the terraced house, our flat, and 5 others, was a part of to a middle-aged married couple who were first-time landlords. They were the kind of people who thought they were smarter than everybody else, and I got the impression they thought property management was going to be the easiest thing ever. We had no problem throughout the sale process. We were assured nothing would change. We didn't interact much with the landlord before anyway. Then 2 weeks after the sale, we got an email from the couple saying that we owed them £20 each more a week. Basically, in our contract, it stated our rent was £75 each a week about 10 times, but there was one typo where it said our rent was £95 each. So they said they could legally charge us £95. We laughed at this. But when it became clear they were serious, we reached out to the letting agent and got them to put in writing that it was a typo. Our rent was always £75, and they even gave us the original advert for the flat with the correct rent on it. We thought this would be the end of it. We were wrong. The couple insisted on coming to our flat for an in-person meeting. When they got there, they said that they asked the old landlord about it, and he was shocked that we'd not been paying enough for 6 months now, and the rent was always £95. I didn't buy this because they had nothing in writing, but I made the argument that of course he would say that because he wouldn't want it to seem like he sold under false pretenses. And if we'd been underpaying by a total of like £160 a month, why had he never spoken to us about it? They said that he was a busy guy with too many properties. Then the husband spent ages condescendingly explaining mortgages to us. Then they declared that if we did not start paying them the higher rent, they would evict us, and we had 24 hours to pay or 30 days to get out, and they left. Honestly, I think they saw 2 22-year-old girls and thought they could scare us into paying more money. What they didn't know is that my friend and I are very pleasant until you piss us off, and we become not so nice anymore. We decided that night that if they wanted to evict us, we were going to make them do it properly, and if they were so pedantic about contracts and rules, we were going to stop letting anything slide. The couple woke up the next morning with an email from our lawyer, my flatmate's brother, a bored lawyer with time on his hands, requesting a formal eviction notice in writing and laying out a record of last night's conversation. Thing was, they didn't actually have legal grounds to evict us, because even if we went to court and a judge favored their interpretation of the contract, we were advised this was unlikely. We still didn't owe them more than a month's rent, which would have been their only legal way of evicting us because we were otherwise great tenants. By 9:15 am they were ringing us, but we ignored them and emailed that our lawyer had advised us to only communicate in writing. We then sent an email informing them that the fancy new front door they just installed could not be unlocked from the inside without a key. which violated fire safety laws, and unfortunately, if this wasn't rectified as soon as possible, we would have to report it. We then sent texts that showed them repeatedly entering our flat with less than 24 hours notice. And did they know that this was illegal? Maybe we should talk to the other tenants, because if they're doing this to everyone, then this could be quite a problem. After about 3 days of this, we received a very nice email saying that they don't agree our rent was supposed to be £75 each a week, but they would graciously allow us to finish out our contract at that rate. By this point, we had found a flat triple the size for £80 each a week and wanted out of that hamster cage. So we offered to move if they signed mutual surrender forms. They eagerly agreed. The best part was that they stubbornly tried to rent that flat at the higher rate, despite us telling them it was a terrible idea, and the flat was empty for over a year. And because they had agreed to end our contract early, they got stuck paying the council tax, not me.